Welcome to the Athlete's Compass Podcast, your North Star for mastering endurance training and holistic health. Join us each week as renowned sports scientist and founder of Athletica.ai, Paul Larson, along with athlete, coach, and sports scientist Marjaana Rakai, and coach and cyclist Paul Warlowski, guide you through the maze of often confusing training principles. Make sure your compass is ready. Class is now in session. Hello, and welcome to the 7th episode and third in our series on recovery of the Athlete's Compass, where we navigate training, fitness, and health for everyday athletes. We decided to do 3 episodes about recovery because it's so important. We stress our bodies, we need recovery. In the first episode, we talked about how to monitor recovery and health. In the second, we talked about sleep. But we talked last week, or Paul mentioned Alistair Brownlee and how he said that sleep was 90% of recovery, nutrition was another 9%, and other strategies were the last 1%. So since we talked about sleep last week, let's do these last 10% and let's talk about nutrition and other modalities. Paul, can you talk about how nutrition plays a role in recovery for everyday endurance athletes?
Sure.
Are there recommendations that you have or supplements or things like that that we might talk about?
Well, I think, really almost like Athletica does with the training is it's the fundamentals are the key aspects. So what are the fundamentals of nutrition? And we need to have, some components of macronutrients, which are the carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and that all have various different functions. And you have to have these micronutrients, which are, things like vitamins and minerals, and there's thousands of them. And then, and you need water as well, good clean water. So these are sort of the fundamentals of nutrition that should form the basis of any human's diet, ultimately. Unfortunately, the situation isn't pretty, Paul. And if we look to globally to the world, and again, the paper I've done with Dr. Phil Maftone and multiple papers, we've shown ultimately that about 80% of the world is what we term overfat. And they're overfat because they're malnourished for the most part. So they're not getting adequate quantities or of these macro and micronutrients. And the biggest culprit is sugar and processed food at the end of the day. And like to keep things super simple is it is basically you just need to consume what Mother Nature is providing for you, what Mother Earth is providing for you. And unfortunately, when we look to the grocery stores, they are that's not totally how we are nourishing ourselves. The middle aisles tend to be laden with commercial creations, frankenfoods, and only towards the outer aisles tend to be more of what Mother Earth has provided us. So to keep things super simple, that's the big picture of what we're dealing with.
So there's no quick fix? I mean, so basically you're saying that we need to eat and drink a good balanced diet of things that are more naturally available to us.
Yeah, that's really it at the end of the day. It's so boring, Paul, and but how do you go and do that? Like how is it possible that, let's just say 80% of the world, let's say we're right with our stats on these papers. And how is it that 80% of the world is not appropriately doing this? That's remarkable, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, And it's, sure, it's not all nutrition. There's a lot of other pollutants. Marjaana will tell us a lot about, what big city pollution can really be all about, and how that potentially influences your health. We talked about sleep in the last episode. That influences your stress levels and then how much fat you're going to store. But the majority is for recovery as well, and overall human health. Is 80% of us are not appropriately consuming foods that allow us to recover optimally.
And I think if I can add to that, I kind of think this is a society problem. We want to be comfortable. We want that quick fix without thinking what it does to our health. Like we want to sit in our car and drive to place B and get our supper, or now after COVID, everything can get delivered to your house, right? We no longer go to farmers markets because we have these big grocery stores in our neighborhoods. We don't have walking paths because, our governments didn't think that walking is important. I think it's like more of a societal problem that we're kind of fighting against, promoting a healthier way. And yes, healthier way might take a little bit more time to prepare, but actually decreases the time of spending in a grocery store. I hate grocery stores. That's like my least favorite thing to do is to go to a grocery store. But as Paul said, just go outside. Don't even go in the middle as much as possible. And as a mom of 3, I'm trying to teach my kids to okay, if you eat cereal, how do you feel a couple of hours after at school? And now they've started to notice the difference. Like, okay, mom, if I have eggs and bacon in the morning, I can go easy the whole school day or until lunchtime, which my older kids have later, without feeling hungry. But if I eat this sugary cereal in the morning, I'm hungry 1 hour later. And I noticed now that I've gone more of a low carb diet, that before I would eat breakfast with the kids 6:30, 7 o'clock. And then after dropping the kids off at school, 8:30, I would be hungry again. And I was supposed to go do a workout. So I would have to eat a snack before the training. And then after training, I was hungry again. So I've noticed a huge difference that I'm not as hungry anymore as I used to when I was stuffing my face with all these, high carb things we promoted to.
Can you give us some examples, Marjaana? What are some of the foods that you maybe used to eat that maybe you eat less of today?
Bread. Born and raised in the Nordic countries, bread is a huge thing. Although the bread, I would say, in the Nordic countries is a little bit healthier than North America. And I don't eat oatmeal anymore like I used to. That was my go-to breakfast before training day, was oatmeal, and then I would add berries and peanut butter and whatnot to add in some, protein. And during the training, we women, we're lucky that way that we can always stuff more food in our bra. So I would I would always have sandwiches there or grapes and that has caused some funny stories what I pull out of my bra. But now I can go 6-hour bike ride and only have some nuts, usually almonds and walnuts next to me. It's just a huge difference. And I noticed that in my recovery too. I'm not constantly, it's so funny. You see runners and triathletes post on social media that they are hangry all the time, going through a marathon block or big training week. They're always constantly just eating. I'm like, no, you don't have to. No, you really don't have to if you add in a little bit of those healthy fats like avocado and olive oils and nuts. And I've noticed a huge difference in recovery.
So, what are some of those most important nutrients that endurance athletes need to consume, or I don't want to say should, but optimally would consume in their diet for recovery?
Well, I think Mariana hit the key one, good fats. So we're talking, essential fatty acids, omega-3s. There's a balance of omega-3s and omega-6s that you'll get in, many of the good quality fat substances that Mariana was talking about. Usually if it's, that comes with animal fat. So, if you're having animals, animal protein sources, they'll usually come with natural fat that you want in your diet. So just think about fish, for example, right? That's going to come with laden with omega-3s, and but even in the if you're consuming a fattier end of a chicken or beef products, there's lots of fat that's in those cuts as well that are good quality. And then over to the protein is so key as well, right? So the building block of protein are amino acids. We have essential amino acids that we need. Essential meaning you can actually get them through, like they must be attained through the diet. Your body can't produce them. So you can only get those through, certain, like I believe, animal products. Actually, there's vegetarian options, but it's just maybe uh, not as complete. So the complete protein I believe an egg is. So if you're lacto-ovo vegetarian, but vegans can have a harder time getting adequate amounts of protein. Also, over to the micronutrients, the B vitamins are one of the key ones that, B12 in particular is so important for energy metabolism. And also the heme components, the iron levels that are in red meat are also so vital. We hear so many athletes suffering from anemia, or they're low in red blood cells. If you're low in oxygen carrying capacity, due to low levels of iron, or heme components that are in your system, you're going to feel fatigue, right? This is all going to contribute to poor hormonal regulation, and eventually will bring us to those downward spirals of not sleeping well, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, this is why, as again, Alistair Brownlee said, 9% is nutrition, right? We need to be thinking about eating on the outer aisles, eating whole foods, and especially, good balance of good quality, free range, if possible, meat products for your proteins, and vegetables as well with
Could you
yeah, that
clarify
come
what?
with the micronutrients.
Sorry, could you clarify what you meant by heme products? Or
Sure. So heme is another word for iron.
okay,
So iron, yeah. So like hematocrit, like
yep. Oh,
is how many you know red blood cells you have in relative to the plasma component. Say for example, hemoglobin. So it's the iron component. So iron is the micronutrient. It's the cation that carries the oxygen to and drops it off. Basically, it takes it from the environment out through your lungs, gets pumped through the heart, gets deposited in all your cells. But in the context of exercise, we think about it often in the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell in our muscles, to give us the energy that we need. So if you're feeling flat, a lot of times coaches and doctors will take a blood test and they'll have a look at these markers. It's probably the first marker that they'll have a look at. If you come in feeling really, really low, let's have a look at your let's do a red blood cell panel, right? And we'll have a look at all the various different components of your red blood cells that are in there. And if those are low, that's and they often are, as a first point of call in individuals that are presenting that are a little bit flat, a little bit low in energy. That's one of the big culprits. And the solution often is finding ways of getting that iron back in the diet. And if again, if you are coming in with on a vegetarian diet, that's a tough ask, right? And I work with a lot of vegetarian athletes, and it's always a hard battle to figure out a ways of getting more heme iron into the diet of those athletes. We are what we eat. I really should have started with that, right? So it's there's no magic about it, right? Like there's a lot of common sense in this whole thing. I'm looking at you guys on the screen, and I'm looking at myself, and we are the products of the last approximately the last year of cell turnover. We're the products of our diet over the last year. So every cell in the body just gets turned right over. Even though we look similar to what we were last year, there's a whole breakdown, catabolism, and anabolism buildup of the whole process. That's in this whole circadian rhythm. That cycle keeps happening. Red blood cells are a classic example. 120 days lifespan, and they will die, and then they'll get rebuilt after every 120 days. All your other cells are on a similar time course of that. So we literally are what you eat. You're looking yourself. You're looking at your last year of food. It's all sitting on you.
Wow.
So for having been in the lower end of the normal iron, is it ferritin stores, I'm always thinking, what should I eat? So I know for vegetables, spinach, beets, potatoes have higher content of iron, I believe, and then there's liver products, which not many people like. I quite enjoy them. And what else? Beef, of course. But also, what a lot of people don't know is that caffeine can decrease the absorption of iron. Am I correct? Or
I wasn't aware of the caffeine issue.
Okay.
Yeah, it's possible, but I just wasn't aware of that one.
Okay.
So yeah, but you nailed it on the sources. Those are all. I mean, I'm sure we could go into detail on getting a full complete list of the various different products. But to my knowledge, the most bioavailable levels of iron in your food. And again, this is what we try to do with athletes that are presenting with low, they're anemic, low iron. They come to me, and we try to convince them to have more of the liver or the beef products, and then potentially from the vegetable standpoint is way down in terms of bioavailability and what you'll take on. But it's then the spinach and the various different vegetables. It's just not even on the same level, right? Like it's up here versus down here, and then there's the pill forms as well, right? That you'll often get supplemented on by either a GP or a nutritionist. But again, the bioavailability, because of all these various different co-transporter molecules that are involved in the natural versus what just can't be provided in a pill form. Although we'll be told that vitamin C is just take a vitamin C tablet with your iron tablet. Well, sure, but it's just not. I'm afraid it's not the same. Again, I don't like the whole strategy of treating the symptoms. And well, what's the what's the cause of the symptom, right? Like, what's the fundamental cause? And the fundamental cause must relate to something. So we're doing something different that's not natural in us. And to me, what's natural is, again, I come from an evolutionary health sort of training background. So I believe that we need to think about how we used to operate in the world, back 10,000 years ago and whatnot, before farming and ag and all this kind of came into play. So one of the interesting strategies that we use in some athletes is that can't stomach liver, like you and I can, Marjaana, but they will still, they'll try it, is actually to cook liver, cut it up, put it in the freezer, and cut it up into little pill forms. And they cut up liver into pills, and they put that in the freezer. And then basically, at a regular dosage, they just take the liver as a pill, and they just swallow it, and it completely reverses the anemia, and they can stomach it as well. And they just take that as the pill, right? Like, that is a way better solution. So we use that in the New Zealand Olympic program with a number of the athletes that had that exact same problem. It's so common.
Marjaana, you've had some experience and trying different technologies for recovery, that other methods that show promise in enhancing recovery for everyday endurance athletes. You want to talk about some of the ones that you have done besides focusing on nutrition?
Sure. My highest recommendation go to getting a rescue dog and doing walking, a lot of walking in the nature. That's very high tech.
That's good.
No, one of the things that when we first started working together, Paul, was you recommended floating. And having read this book, I'm gonna do a little plug for Good to Go.
Mm-hmm.
That was interesting book. And one of the recovery methods that she evaluated in this book was floating. So I was a little bit skeptical because I thought, like, getting into a pod for an hour, me and my monkey brain, how is that gonna go? But I find, because I think, this is my theory, I think that my nervous system is a little sensitive, and I experience world high degree, and I take everything in and process it constantly, and that's why I think also sleep is so important for me personally. But getting into that chamber, total complete darkness, just hearing my heartbeat, I thought that I was gonna freak out, but I didn't, and it was such a lovely experience. And I just kept, in the beginning, I just kept thinking of my breath, just try to keep it calm. And when I came out of that after 60 minutes, it was like a night and day. Like, I swear, because what the floating is basically taking all your sensories away, like sensory deprivation, I think it's called. And I walked out of there, and I swear my eyesight was better. I could smell better. And everything, like hearing everything and I felt so calm, like so refreshed and energized. The only downside was that I had 30 minutes in Dubai traffic after. So that was just kind of like, okay, try to keep this.
Yeah.
So if I could have my dream house, like the prof, I would have a little pod in my house to do a floating session every week or whenever my monkey brain takes over. But walking, I think that's almost as good, depending where you are. If you have beautiful nature and mountains or ocean, like I find always walking by a body of water always calms me down. Um, that's a really good one too. And just sometimes just sitting there on a tree stump and looking at the leaves and let the nature come to you. That's all I need to recover.
Well, and that's interesting because when I read Good to Go, what I understood from what she said is that sleep is the most important, and that works. Nutrition works. The other elements, there's not a lot of necessarily evidence that they do work, but the two parts that she talked about was that with the float tanks, with meditation and those kind of things, we calm ourselves down. Plus, massage, compression garments, those kind of things, they they can give a placebo effect where we think they're working and therefore they do. So Paul, I mean, is there science behind this? I mean, are any of these technologies like the float tank, like compression, is there science that's emerging from them? Is there enough to find value in doing them besides the placebo or the relaxation effect?
For sure. So again, some yes and some no, and what really matters at the end of the day is what works for you. So if something works for you, you believe it works, you're getting a placebo effect from it. Whatever, whether it's real or not,
Right.
if you feel it works, then you're going to do it, right? Like, so massage is one of the greatest ones with that. It's really hard to create a study that can demonstrate the efficacy of massage, because what are you going to do for the placebo, or the control condition, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't blind it, right? Now, that being said, they have done blinding versions, at least like alternate things, like a couch for like a couch condition for things like the float tank, and they've even compared it to drugs as well, and they've found that like the float tank, and this research is done predominantly by the Laureate Brain Research Institute, big, huge MRI machines, etc., out of Oklahoma. Feynman is the author, and that's his center there. It's just phenomenal. But basically, there's actually a lot more research than you'd think into sensory deprivation tanks. And again, just to be clear, these tanks, if you haven't had that experience, it takes away the experience of gravity, because you're floating in a tub of Epsom salts. It's completely dark in there, and again, that's wild for some people, like Marjaana, when she was probably even at first imagining she's going to be in this. Some people have this level of anxiety where they can't even like comprehend getting into this thing. That's a classic example of you probably need it. Actually, you'd probably really benefit from that if you're anxious about even thinking about the process of going into one of these tanks. So have a think of that. But yeah, no sound, no sight, no influence of gravity, and yeah, and you it takes a lot of time, maybe half the time, for your monkey brain to settle down. And then Marjaana even mentioned the process of interoception, basically you hearing your organs doing their job. For example, you might hear your stomach contracting and moving its food through your digestive system. You can listen to your heartbeat. You can hear your every breath. It's really quite wild from that perspective. And all of these are, I guess, just ways of putting you back in tune with your body, and we tend to lose that in today's tech age, and with distractions and just everything. So I'm going all over the place, but that one has a lot of science. Compressions, not a whole heap. I think clinical compression. So there's different levels of pressure ultimately, and like clinical compression ones where they're really squeezing, they've shown a little bit of something. But again, if it offers a placebo, then great. Massage, I think there's a lot there to massage. Human physical touch, and the neurological thing is, I don't care if they haven't demonstrated that one. It's recommended if you can get it. It's recommended by all. I recommend it for all my athletes, especially for a good therapist is worth their weight in gold. So
They are also almost your psychologist too.
Oh,
like
yeah.
if you find a massage therapist, shout out to my old team in Dubai. They become your friends, and
Yep.
it's just so much more than just a massage.
Agree. Yeah, so those would be the big ones. Over to your forte, Paul, with your massage, or sorry, your yoga. Like yoga is a great form of recovery, in my opinion, just to facilitate mobility, especially as we age. That's a great recovery one. I can't emphasize how much better I feel when I've done just a few yoga poses. Like, it doesn't have to be vigorous or anything, but just some classic, classic warriors, downward dogs, up dog, all these sorts of things, right? Like, yeah, they're very what my sitting body needs on a daily basis, right? Sitting or cycling body. I need to move it in some opposite poses and move some hips and hamstrings.
And talking about yoga, I think also like the mind part of yoga and breathing, like moving your body in sync with your breathing, is so good for us. But I wanted to ask you, Paul, how did you, because you're coaching yoga in your endurance, simple endurance coaching business. How did you get started with yoga?
Well, and yoga has been a part of what I have done as an athlete for a lot of years because, if you ever see any of my yoga, I mean, I'm about as awkward as they get. When you have that Instagram model, that's not me. I've broken a lot of bones in my life, and I don't move that well. And so yoga, I went and got my instructor's license and certification because when I was 52, I think, because I didn't see a lot of older guys who didn't move very well teaching classes, and I needed to help and other older guys who didn't move very well and other humans not who didn't move very well see that yoga is a really effective tool not only for building strength but for recovery. And now that's something that I do with all of my athletes now, is that I offer a Monday night recovery session where we just move for 15 minutes at the most, and it's just a way of centering, of breathing, where you move according to your breath. And there's that mobility that comes into it with your hips and your shoulders and all the different directions that we don't move very often when we're running and cycling. And I find that yoga, I'm sure that if I didn't do yoga on a regular basis, I wouldn't be able to ride my bike and I wouldn't be able to run, because I would just be arthritis, I'm sure, would build up so much in my shoulders and all the places where I've broken things. So it's an integral part of what I do for recovery, as that active recovery. So do you think that, Marjaana, one of the things that you have talked about is, are there gender differences with recovery modes that might be out there? Are men and women different in some respects?
That's kind of a ongoing debate in my head. I read somewhere that ice baths are not beneficial for women, while they are beneficial for men. But I have a completely different experience from ice baths. And last year, when I did Ironman Finland, 2 days after, I went to the swimming pool where they have ice bath or the cold pool. I can't remember what the temperature is, but it's like at 4 degrees Celsius. And then they have a warm tub next to it. So you go 30 seconds in the cold one, and then you go for 2 minutes on the warm one. And I kept doing that like 5 times. I love the feeling of tingles in your toes when you lose like feeling when you're in the cold bath. But when I went to the pool, especially my quads were so sore from Ironman that I couldn't really walk very well. But I walked out of the pool like completely normal, and I met up with a friend and went for a walk in the nature, and I was so mind blown how well my range of motion had returned just from that one session. So maybe, I don't know, Paul, if you know if there's gender differences in recovery modes like ice bath or anything else, can you think of?
Yeah, I mean, I reflect a little bit on the study that Philip is doing with MiraCare and looking at the various different, hormone differences but I don't think there's huge ones. It's a good question. I think we might save that one and ask Philip in the future, but I don't think there's any hard evidence at this point in the game. I'm reflecting on my Wim Hof experience, my cold water immersion, and to me, there's something there with just a resetting of your whole central nervous system, your whole hormonal system. I'm thinking more of the mind. Everything sort of starts with the mind, right? When the mind is, I guess, capable through the HPA axis, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, we see the all the downstream hormones do their things correctly, and it controls the stress. And I would imagine females would be similar in terms of controlling their stress. And I'm not aware of the research suggesting that there's a negative effect in females. There's always an individual component. So some males will probably feel they don't benefit from the cold water immersion, and likewise, some females might find that is too much of a stress, right? And we know of, again, with the cold water immersion stuff, there's cold shock syndrome, where you can actually have a shock to your system and you ultimately stop functioning. And that's not a like you just have a hyper sympathetic kind of reaction to it, and you just almost become paralyzed, which can cause drownings and these sorts of things, right? Ooh, so yeah. Caution always with these sorts of things. The video I demonstrated a couple episodes back, be cautious if you're doing these types of things, and mindful, progress the stimulus. But yeah, I'm not totally aware of gender differences, Paul.
So here are the takeaways that there's been a lot that we have talked about, but one is the nutrition, water consumption are really critical elements in recovery, so that we are planning our fueling to support our activities, getting good protein and fats to really aid recovery. Number 2, yoga, meditation, breathwork. These are all free and useful tools for everyday athletes. Ice baths. There's a whole host of other modalities that will help you. But that leads to number 3. Regardless of whether the science has necessarily proven it, like massage, if something feels like it works, the placebo effect, it's real and it will work for you. And whether it's relaxing, whether it's a real scientific effect, it doesn't matter. If it feels like it's working, it does. That is all for both the recovery series and for this week. Thanks for listening, and join us next week when we talk about, well, you will find out. For Marjaana Rakai, Dr. Paul Larson, I am Paul Worlowski, and this has been the Athletes Compass podcast. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Athletes Compass podcast, your guiding light through the complex world of training for your endurance sport. For a deeper dive into the science, listen to our companion podcast, the Training Science Podcast, and check out the AI adaptive training platform, Athletica.ai. Thanks.